This isn't an ordinary fight. This is a fight between the powers of light and darkness.
Welcome to the Restitutor Orbis channel, and I thought we would go back to some basics and take a look at a more genuine exploration of Los Angeles. Now, more genuine by looking at a photo album. Of course, we know that when we look at photos, we have the usual challenges. Are the photos accurate? Have they been altered? Is the chronology on the photos accurate? We're going to take this at face value, though, and see what they show us. And Los Angeles is intriguing because of its location and the fact that it's essentially in a very arid area. And one of the other things we'll be exploring are the water wars that had to occur in the 1800s and the early 1900s in order to allow Los Angeles to flourish as a city because it lacks water. Here we have a view of the southeast corner of Temple Street and Broadway showing the county courthouse and the Hall of Records. And you can see this is the exact thing you'd expect for a county courthouse in the early 1900s. You know, some sort of sandstone or limestone, at least that's what we'll be told, very elaborate stairs. I like how they have the slant construction. They've built this up on a hill, and here we have the Hall of Records, a very impressive building itself. So right off the bat, they're already showing us that there are very impressive and unique buildings that are available in Los Angeles in the early 1900s. I mean, how can you have a county courthouse without a cupola? How can you have a county courthouse without little subsidiary towers with smaller cupolas or domes on it? And even a dome back here. Impressive. Now let's look at it from a different perspective. And I like how on this image they say county courthouse. They don't have to spell out Los Angeles. You know it's the Los Angeles County Courthouse. And is this the Hall of Records as well? Yeah, we got some little domes here in the Hall of Records. Now, we've actually seen this type of architecture before with this tower, and we've seen it with several Union stations. We've seen it at the City Hall in Minneapolis and Minnesota. So again, they seem to embrace that style and build it all over the place because getting the sandstone and the limestone where it needed to be and having the architects and the contractors that could build buildings like that, well, it was easy to achieve. At least that's what we'll be told. Very impressive structure and very unique view of Los Angeles. I like how we just have people sitting around. Something seems off about the image, though, doesn't it? Got a little blur with the vehicle right here on the road. Early cars. And we already have a nice, impressive monument out in front of it. And keep in mind that when we did the exploration of Los Angeles, we know that a lot of these buildings are newer. And here we have a close-up view of Los Angeles County Courthouse viewed through the colonnade of the recently completed City Hall. Recently completed. Where exactly were these columns constructed? And how did they get this fine detailing on them? And look at the detail right here, in between the arches. Impressive. And as if that's not impressive enough, you can see the Hall of Records in the City Hall again. Again, early 1900s, because there were a lot of people in California, and they all knew how to build buildings just like this. Or so we'll be told. Broadway Christian Church. And isn't this a nice little church right here? Oh, I like how they have the door down here in the ground. But then you've got stairs going up to the door up here on the second floor. So 1, 2, 3 floors, maybe a nice little attic, and very intriguing domes with little spires on the domes because, how are you going to know it's a Christian church unless you have domes with little spires on it? And I like the palm tree right there. Interesting, though, with some of the foundation stones. And again, you have the little entryway with the spheres on top of it. Very elaborate banisters. You can't do a church without banisters. And even looking at the windows and the decoration on the windows. Oh, it's Victorian style, of course. Located across the street from the county courthouse. So you're going into Los Angeles and you realize it's a new city and you see these very impressive structures. Hotel Ford. Oh. And look at this. And again, we can see some of the detailing on this with the Hotel Ford. And we can see this is one of these more classic structures that will be told it's a manor or it's in some sort of Second Empire architectural style. And what do they tell us about it? Where it's located, this is the future site of the Bank of Italy building. In this photo, it is Hotel Ford with a dentist office above. It's also known as the United States Hotel. Knickerbocker buildings off to the right. Yeah, it's quite impressive, isn't it? Open night and day. Just feels like they slapped that on there. And go see your dentist. Wonder what kind of great dental work you could get done in the early 1900s. Oh, 1921. So it's after World War I. Bank of Italy building today. Nice colonnades right there. Little columns and baseline structures. Views showing the newly constructed Bank of Italy. The building is a neoclassical base supporting office block. A rusticated base with 3-story monumental colonnades. Date built 1922. So they decided to build it so it already looked old and then put some colonnades out in front of it. The more of these structures I look at, I do question what exactly is going on. And here's another view of it. 1920s. And all these photos are from the 1920s. Interesting thing going on with the flag there. Getting picked up by those Santa Ana winds already. And here we have Lowe's State Theater. And here they show us a very convincing, sarcasm at max, construction photo. You always know it's a convincing construction photo when they have this little information block in the lower corner. I recall looking at the Buffalo City Hall and we saw that. Look at some of the construction detailing, though, on this. Now, it looks like they're just putting up girders. And yet, when you look at what Lowe's Theater looks like when it's complete, we suddenly have this. Ah, yes, more rusticated stone, as we'll be told. It was aged because they wanted that aged appearance on it. And so we're to believe that this is the result of this construction photo. Well, if you want to believe it, maybe that's good enough to convince you. Be my guest. I don't see any issues with it. Sarcasm meter high again. And again, we have a construction site, but we just have vehicles cruising right on by. We've got people walking on by. It's no problem. 1921. But then the next photo is dated 1921. So make of it what you will. It didn't take long. We could put them up really quickly then. We had no safety standards. There were no modern amenity distractions. And then again, we have this corner sign here, Lowe's Theater. But yet you see 1924, 3 years later, and it looks like the structure's been standing for hundreds of years. But, that's explained by the rusticated stone. Lots of people suddenly around in Los Angeles. Didn't take long. Trolleys going every which direction. View from above. Downtown's busiest intersection, Lowe's State Theater, is playing Syncopating Sue, starring Corinne Griffith. Syncopating Sue. What an interesting name for a film. You'd never see a film titled that today. Well, I guess they expanded their vocabulary base with what they were showing. And again, look how old the theater looks. And just unbelievably crowded. It almost seems like another world. Now we move on to the Eagle Rock City Hall, 1923, showing detail facade and front entrance. Built in 1922 and was designed by architect William Lee Woollett. 1 year. Look at that facade. Yes, of course, that's exactly what you need on a city hall. You need some large columns and some very interesting adornments on top of the columns. Intriguing photograph. And indeed, they all are. Angelus Temple. Now look at this. It's almost as though, here we have the columns that are built in the wall. We actually have an extension, a circular rotunda area. Bible school, and Amy Semple McPherson's residence. Wow. So back in the day when you could operate a Bible school and it could be a residence as well. I suppose this is the amalgamation of Bible school and residence architectural style. What do you really call this? Neoclassical with residence? Very intriguing structure. And what's the explanation on this? Exterior view of the Bible school. Founder of the Foursquare Church. Amy Semple McPherson. And as we well know, nothing represents the interests of the church better than having a very elaborate and well-adorned building. And you may as well have a great residence as well, because what else would it be? And here we have nighttime view of the temple. Yeah, it's quite a temple, isn't it? And where did the money for this come from, I wonder? Well, don't ask. It was the early 1920s. Lots of money available. Look at this auditorium on the inside. Evangelist Amy Semple McPherson leading a song during Foursquare Gospel Church service at the Angelus Temple in 1930. So this is once the Great Depression had started, but maybe it didn't hit California so quickly. Very impressive balconies, and quite a layout for a temple. In her time, she was the most publicized Christian evangelist, surpassing Billy Sunday and her other predecessors. She conducted public faith healing demonstrations before large crowds, allegedly healing tens of thousands of people. McPherson's articulation of the United States as a nation founded and sustained by divine inspiration continues to be echoed by many pastors and churches today. News coverage sensationalized misfortunes with family and church members, particularly inflaming accusations she had fabricated her reported kidnapping, turning it into a national spectacle. McPherson's preaching style, extensive charity work, and ecumenical contributions were a major influence in revitalization of American evangelical Christianity in the 20th century. Hmm. Wow. Very impressive structure. You can see a little dome on the top of it, appears. And it looks like they're all set for their broadcast. I wonder what the origin of this building truly was. Exterior view, Glendale Boulevard and Park Avenue. Continuous revival. Radio towers for the church's radio station, KFSG, are visible on the roof. Oh, you had your own church radio stations back then. Very impressive. Oh, she was a noted pioneer in the use of modern media, especially radio, and the second woman to be granted a broadcast license. Nice how has the sign right there on the structure. And again, looking at the columns that are integrated into the structure. So it's a residence, it's a Bible school. Wonder exactly what the construction material was. Oh, looks like we have a little bit of a flood here. 1940, sloshing through the flooded street in front of Angelus Temple in Echo Park. Now, I'll admit, I had absolutely no awareness of this particular individual. Postcard view. Does that really look like a postcard, or does that actually look like a photograph? Again, an impressive structure. I mean, again, this looks like a photograph that they put on a postcard. So apparently at this point, they were beyond just doing the drawn, painted pictures for postcards. Here we actually have photographs that are postcards. Almost as though someone's looking to obscure the official account. Oh, 1998, Echo Park and its lake are visible. The famed Angelus Temple with its dome roof can be seen on the lower left, and downtown LA skyscrapers sit majestically in the background. Very impressive. And now we head to the Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum. The Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum is not to be confused with the Rose Bowl, because this is the Coliseum where the USC Trojans play. Here we go. It was built about the same time, though, as the Rose Bowl. Aerial view showing the early stages of the construction. The arches and east entranceway are already in place. Well, of course they are. I mean, you have to start somewhere when you're building a giant Coliseum, right? And yet here we have these other very interesting construction photos. So 1922, again, the exact same time frame as the Rose Bowl over in Pasadena. Construction continues. Large stadium was built in less than 2 years. I'm surprised it even took them that long. And you might recall during our stadium exploration where we were positing explanations behind some of these stadiums. Again, another stadium that it just looks like they dug it out. But then again, who knows on the veracity of some of these images? It is intriguing to consider it. And yes, I have actually watched games at this Coliseum and have waited for the great crowd and watched as the good people of Los Angeles supported their team. And for the longest time, the USC Trojans were the professional team of Los Angeles. Fortunately for Los Angeles, that's not the case anymore if you're a football fan. Very interesting layout, though, looking at the stadium and the way that everything is intricately brought together. Now, again, asking that question because there's problems with some of these construction photos. They seem to allude to different things, and we have to wonder what exactly is going on with these images. Aerial view looking north showing an almost completed Coliseum. The next step is the landscaping. Well, let's see if we get that. View showing the first football game, USC versus Pomona. Yeah, something tells me USC is not taking on any sort of opponents like Pomona anymore. Very odd, though. Look at all the empty stands in this for a USC game. Can you imagine that? I mean, for the longest time, you would have people just lined up for hours for pregame festivities and just waiting to get into this Coliseum and packing every seat. And it didn't matter whether Pete Carroll was the coach or whoever, this entire stadium was full. But look at this very interesting image. As though we don't have enough people to fill it, or we don't have enough interest in football at that time to fill the stadium. The origin of sports in the United States and the Western world is quite intriguing as well. The big three: football, basketball, baseball. Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum opened on June of 1923. Some 5 months later, first football game played there. Crowd of 12,836. Yeah, very different, huh? Who knows on the accuracy of those counts? Oh, there we go. That's more like it. 1930. Preparation for the 1932 Olympics. Note the Olympic torch has yet to be installed. And they packed the house for the Olympics back then. Interesting when you look at the roads that run around it as well, and the geometric precision of how they laid out the entire stadium. And then here we have, oh, I love this. They pull up a car within the stadium. Yeah, I don't think you'd see that today unless they're actually down on the field. Oh, it's a Ford Model A parked behind the wooden bleachers. Yes, the wooden bleachers. Note the torch we see today would not be installed until 1930. You really have to wonder on some of these images, especially with the Coliseum. And here we have the El Capitan Theater. 2020 view looking up at the El Capitan Theater. As seen from in front of the old Hollywood Masonic Temple, now the El Capitan Entertainment Center. And of course, you need to have fine columns to have an excellent entertainment center. It all makes sense. Don't question it. Los Angeles Normal School. Now, that was interesting terminology from the 1800s to the early 1900s. They always had all these normal schools all over the land. Millspaw Hall at the Los Angeles State Normal School on Vermont Avenue, later to become UCLA. Students can be seen sitting in the shade in the eucalyptus tree. And look at that dome back there. And this is something that we see with universities across not just the United States, but everywhere. Very elaborate, intricate construction that was done at a very early time frame. Well, I guess we all took education very seriously. And I suppose that makes sense. Closer photos showing some of the impressive construction of this dome or cupola structure, some of the arches, and how long has this really been here? 1925. Oh, it's already ivy covered, and we have Beaux Arts style. Oh yes, that should send off the alarms right there whenever they say it's Beaux Arts. Very intriguing just looking at some of these smaller buildings around Los Angeles. The Egyptian Theater. Now here's where things get interesting. 1922, view looking east on Hollywood Boulevard, showing the newly opened Egyptian Theater. It looks relatively modest, but as you start to look closer at it, you get a little bit of a different impression. 1922, and the original Robin Hood. I'll bet that was a good version of Robin Hood. I'll be honest, I haven't seen it. But look at some of this construction. Now, what exactly is this constructed out of? Well, I'm sure there's somebody in the comments who's going to tell me that my grandfather walked past that building and can tell you that it was just made out of some sort of stucco and it was just a facade. It was not real. Looks pretty real to me, and if you're going to be running people under there, definitely makes you wonder. And here in the interior, now again, are these just displays? Is this just something that they put up as part of a great novelty? Everybody was into what was Egypt in the early 1900s. We got an Egyptian king. I thought it was a pharaoh. Indian elephants, billboard advertising, The Thief of Baghdad. That is a good film. I have actually seen it. And here we look at the interior. Looking at the stage and look at some of the ornate detailing here. Now, what exactly is really going on? Did they really replicate Egypt to this extent just for a theater? Now, I don't care what this is actually built out of. This took a lot of effort and a lot of time. And again, this is in the early 1920s. Now everyone will say, well, it's the roaring 1920s. It was an easy achievement. And look at all this decorative detailing here. But yet there's something unique about this. I mean, is this inspired by Egypt or is this something else entirely? Those are the kind of questions we have to ask. Very elaborate and intricate theater. I would certainly love to go see a show at a theater that looked like that. And then looking back towards the audience and in the balcony, and again, you can see some of the ornate detailing. And look at some of this construction right here. Very impressive. Can never look at enough of these theaters. And then here it is in 1924. Railroad tracks can be seen on Hollywood Boulevard in front of the theater. Oh, yes, of course. And again, what's the actual construction nature of this? Was this something that was just sitting there? Or was this something they threw together really quickly just for a novelty? I mean, when you look closer, it does give you the impression that these are actual blocks. So much effort put into this and all these theaters. I mean, everyone just thinks of the theaters that they know of in Los Angeles, but there were many more than we tend to think of. Now look at this, a bowling alley with columns around it. And this is Jensen's Recreational Center complex in 1929. They tell us it's ornate Beaux Arts and Italianate style. Yes, it's exactly what you need, Beaux Arts, to have an effective bowling alley at that time. I mean, are these lights? These look to be lights, and what ornate decoration for lights, along with these columns and these balconies. Unbelievably impressive. I mean, we can't have an effective bowling alley today because we don't have these very beautiful ornate Beaux Arts columns in them. Or are they actually Italianate? I guess it just depends on who you ask. And here's what the front of it looks like. Jensen's Recreation Center. Nice little trophy there. And the interesting decorations on the facade. And this is yet another structure that you might be lulled into thinking isn't that ornate, but then when you go on the inside and you see this, I mean, why would anybody spend this kind of time arranging this for a bowling alley? Just don't ask. And some of the drug stores, Circle Drug Co. Remember when there used to be drugstores all across the nation? And we do have some more modern photos, and you can still see that the coloration of the bricks and the styling is still there. A little more obvious, though, in the older photo. Quite intriguing. Just make it black and white, and no one will be able to tell what time the photo was taken. And again, some of these patterns here with the brick. Wondrous brickwork in an older building. And now let's look at the Beverly Theater in Beverly Hills. Ah, yes, here we go, 1925. Newly built. And strangely enough, we have that odd dark line around it as though someone were drawing around it, or it almost feels like the photo is superimposed. I'm not saying that it is, it just appears that way. Maybe my mind's just playing tricks on me. And look at some of this intricate work here. Are we in Los Angeles, or are we somewhere in Egypt again? Now this looks a little bit more of a better photo. This is from the 1920s. And yet, oddly enough, look at how the coloration, or at least the coloration of the stonework, appears on it. So a very interesting slew of theaters, as though they knew Los Angeles was going to be the center of the entertainment world. And they quickly built it up. Look at the stage here with some of the detailing on this. Very impressive. And here you can see in the 1970s, Beverly Hills with the domed Beverly Theater. Still stands out today. None of the other more recent buildings remotely compared to it. You got to look in the distance here, and you see something that compares to it. Ah, yes, there we go. Modernity, more of a modern display sign on this theater. But you can see it still retains a lot of its original excellence and natural beauty. And look at that close-up showing the dome. Yeah, we just don't build domes anymore, do we? Or when we do, they're certainly not constructed in this manner. Because we have limitations and resources, and remember our aforementioned distractions. The Farmers and Merchants National Bank. Ah, yes, of course. This is exactly what we'd expect for a national bank. 1923. Architectural designs on the building. Yes, no doubt. But really, when you look at all the other buildings surrounding it, you do get a little bit more of an ornate construction behind them. All when they were initially established in Los Angeles, because it all makes perfect sense. Historical notes. Oh, classical revival style. One of Southern California's finest examples of early temples of finance. What a term, temple of finance, which were popular at the turn of the century. Why don't we still use that term? Sounds very descriptive. Two-story facade reminiscent of a Roman temple. I mean, I like this because they're actually spelling it out very clearly. It was the first incorporated bank in Los Angeles, founded in 1871 by 23 prominent Los Angeles businessmen, with an initial capital of $500,000. Makes sense. The three largest subscribers, and it lists them. Oh, one of the California governors. How about that? John G. Downey. Because everybody was just loaded with money back then. It was the 1800s, remember? Biltmore Hotel. And on to the Biltmore Hotel. 1923, people sit in Pershing Square while across the street, flag-decorated banners hang from the still unfinished Biltmore Hotel. Yes, unfinished. Are they actually cleaning it? Because again, it looks like it's been standing up there for quite a while. I've actually stayed at this hotel, and it is still a very impressive structure. The Los Angeles Biltmore Hotel opened in 1923. With its 1,500 guest rooms, it was the largest hotel west of Chicago. And you can see that it's a very impressive structure. And they have quite a layout. And indeed, the brick facade here on the walkway looks like it's been there for quite some time. The architectural firm Schultz and Weaver designed Biltmore's exterior in a synthesis of Spanish, Italian, Renaissance Revival, Mediterranean Revival, and Beaux Art styles. So I have to ask, whatever happened to all this amalgamation of styles that they were doing in the 1920s? We were just not creative anymore in the 2000s. We have to constantly rip off of what's already been done, rinse and repeat over and over again, whether it's our buildings, our structures, or our films. I'm just asking questions. I mean, look at that fountain out there. Why is it we can't do something like this today, or why don't we bother doing something like this today? And yes, I'm looking forward to the usual slew of reasons in the comments. Please let me know what you think. Just tell me why. View of the Biltmore Hotel on the corner of 5th and Olive, and you can see in some of the colorations and the difference of the blockwork and the bricks on this. And yet here we have a little portal window, and it's a very impressive structure. Of course, the interior is no less impressive, and this photo here from the 1940s, ornate lobby, and it still looks like that today. It's very beautiful, and it definitely gives you the impression that you're in something very different. And of course, they had the time to do this kind of decoration on the ceiling, and we won't say anything about this very impressive chandelier. And a lot of this you can still see there today as you go into any of these old world buildings. Ah, 2-story tall ballroom. And of course, it's a real ballroom because you decorate the ceiling like this, and then you have chandeliers that are actually connected to the ceiling. And once again, no detail spared when they laid this out and constructed it in the early 1920s. Because remember, this is just when we're building anything and everything, right down to this handrail and even the decoration below it. Very impressive. And yes, you can still go stay in the Biltmore Hotel today. 1943. Yes. And they certainly weren't building structures like that during World War II. Look at the pediments above each of the doorways and then the elaborate archway. Nope, in World War II, we really weren't building anything anywhere. We're building ships, at least that's what the United States was doing. Lots of Essex-class carriers, 24 in 3 short years. Because remember, the United States was caught by surprise in Pearl Harbor. It still used this terminology. You were Pearl Harbored. But it looks like these individuals are having a grand old time. View of the lower eastern facade. Buntings and a banner welcoming visiting groups. Has a little bit of a patriotic flavor to it. And here you can see some of the decoration above these windows. Very impressive. And once again, we have the pillars amalgamated into the wall. So it gives us a very different origin for this particular building. Or again, we go back to that question, why aren't we constructing buildings like this after World War II? It was just too difficult. We could figure out how to put together a vast naval armada and build aircraft carriers that operated in fleets of aircraft carriers, but after World War II, it was just too difficult to build buildings like this, because who would really want to see this, when you can see these nice glass and steel towers everywhere? Ah, there you go. See an example right there? That's the modern LA we think of. And yet, even though these buildings may be taller, for some reason, the structure here greatly exceeds them in terms of aesthetic appeal. But if you want to argue the point, by all means, let me know in the comments. And really, that's the purpose of this initial exploration, is just to get an idea of how Los Angeles has changed, because we can see its more modern incarnation, perhaps a completely different civilization, as opposed to its earlier incarnation. We're going to be exploring Los Angeles in more detail, and we're going to be considering the story of the water wars, or how they were actually able to bring water to the great LA basin. Well, thank you for joining me. Please like, comment, and subscribe.
I'd love to stay, but